Shortly after the planning retreat this spring, where the council again affirmed its desire to make Clayton an arts community, I visited Paducah, Kentucky, an old river town of 26,000 people that's being mentioned in the same breath as New York, Paris, and Florence these days. I met at City Hall with Artist Relocation Coordinator Renee Nunez, who filled me in on their highly successful project to turn Paducah into a world-class arts community. Now, she wouldn't tell me how much money they've spent on the program in the 7 years since it started, though it's in the tens of millions, but she was quick to say that their tracking shows that in one form or another, they get back more than $14 for every dollar they've spent, making this a national model for using the arts for economic development. The project has already won many major awards, including the prestigious American Planning Association's National Planning Award. And as impressive as all that is, the thing that impressed me the most is the way the project has changed the image of Paducah itself. An old river town whose glory years faded long ago is now billing itself as the Soho of the South, and it's attracting more attention than anyone ever dreamed possible. Dozens of newspaper and magazine articles over the last few years have painted a new picture of Paducah as one of the world's up-and-coming places. The place to be if you're an artist. The city is repackaging itself for the 21st century and doing a great job of it. The focus of all this is a 30-block neighborhood adjacent to downtown called Lower Town, where dilapidated and decaying mansions have been turned into showcases where artists work in their studios, tend their yards, and sell their art. Dozens of old mansions have been reconstructed and dozens more are under renovation right now. The city gets between 40 and 60 calls a week from artists wanting to move to Paducah, and they get an average of 6 calls a day from cities who want to find out how they're doing all of this. Now, for years they've said no when other towns called, but Renee said yes to me because I know Paducah and because of our mutual friend Lyle Summit. Now, here's what she told me. Some areas offer artists old buildings for studios, cheap rent, tax breaks, and things like that, but their success has been spotty because artists have a tendency to come and go. Paducah approached it differently. Instead of building an arts community, they would build a community of artists. They wanted something that would get artists to come to Paducah on a permanent basis and become a permanent part of the community. That's when a local artist and the city's top planner got together and came up with the idea to offer them Lower Town. Lower Town was Paducah's first real residential neighborhood. It's right next to downtown and near the riverfront. Its first houses were built during a period of prosperity before the Civil War, and by the 1920s it had grown into a tree-covered area of more than 300 huge and costly buildings. Gingerbread Victorians, stately Queen Anne's, they were all mingled in with brick stores, warehouses, and a few smaller houses. During the second half of the 20th century, however, as residents moved out to the suburbs, Lower Town began to deteriorate. Slumlords bought up the houses and sliced them into apartments. By the 1990s, Lower Town was 70% rental property, and as the buildings decayed, so did the quality of life. Crime shot up, and Lower Town became known as the place to get drugs and find trouble. But a few years ago, Mark Barone, the artist who lived in Lower Town, launched a crusade to save the area he loved, and he got city planner Tom Barnett to help him. They took their idea for Lower Town to city officials who saw potential for economic development, and soon a plan emerged. Buy up the blighted areas and then sell the old houses to artists for $1 apiece, an offer that would prove hard to refuse. And if an artist wanted to build a new home instead, that was fine with the city. They'd give them the lot to build it on for free. Another piece of the puzzle was offered by a local bank, which agreed to give loans for up to 4 times the worth of the property, so that artists could afford the huge renovation costs. Rezoning to allow studio, gallery, and home to coexist came next. They offered other incentives too, like a $2,500 bonus that can be used for landscaping or architectural plans. And they had tax forgiveness built into that as well. And also the city's taken steps in a concrete way to make the area more livable by adding street lights, sidewalks, a police substation, lower speed limits, and more stop signs. Ira and Charlotte Wynn, who owned a failing art studio, were the first to buy. They had decided to close their studio and move to Illinois, but at the last minute were persuaded to give the new program a try first. Then another one came, and then another, and then another. Soon the area began to boom with musicians, painters, sculptors, photographers, bookbinders, fabric makers, illustrators, jewelers, even writers and cooks. Paducah doesn't care what the art is. They just want artists. And now they have more than 70, with more and more on the way. Some of the artists suffered a sort of culture shock, though. After all, they had just been relocated to a small western Kentucky river town that had once been a rail and steamboat center. And it's an old town where the Tennessee River and the Ohio rivers meet, and people are used to working hard for a living. And it's a blue state, too, with blue state attitudes. But Renee said most artists say they wouldn't even think of leaving now that they've gotten used to the slow southern pace. For those who hate the rat race, Paducah's like heaven, she said. A California artist herself, Renee said she fell in love with the town immediately when she got here. Now, Paducah has artists who are homeowners, and they not only feel like they belong, they actually do belong. This is where their kids will grow up. The city advertises and promotes their artists nationwide. Each one has a space on the city's website, and there's no end to the amount of printed promotional material available. Available property is listed on the website, too, along with info that the city believes would be helpful to new residents. The city's big art celebration is coming up later this month, and there are festivals of one type or another all through the year. Paducah is becoming a destination city. People come here for the day or for the weekend, and there's optimism that in a few years they'll be coming for the week. Paducah has even begun billing itself as the Soho of the South, which tickles the old-timers, but it sells well around the country. For folks like me who knew what Paducah was before all this, the change is very hard to believe. But if an old, worn-out river town like Paducah can do it, we can do it too.